In the autumn of 1943 on the Eastern Front, Germany's defence rests on worn-out men and guns that are too heavy. Along broken roads they drag 7.5 centimetre Pak 40 anti-tank guns. Crews lean their shoulders into the trails and the wheels sink into the mud. On the other side of the front line, new batches of T-34 arrive. In some areas, reinforced vehicles with extra armour appear, and in the West Tank Sherman are already being prepared for Operation Overlord. Germany no longer advances. It only tries to seal breakthroughs and each time is late with moving its heavy guns. Reports from infantry units make it clear where the gap has opened. The heavy Pak 40 can reliably destroy a tank, but its mass of about 1,400 kilograms, 3,100 pounds, requires a tractor, horses, or several gun crews at once. Light weapons such as Panzerfaust 30 and Panzerfaust 60 are cheap and dangerous, but work at tens of metres, not hundreds, and force the gunner to let armour come almost up to the trench. Between this close zone and the distance where it's still possible to stop an attack, there remains an empty space of about 700 metres, 765 yards, and exactly there the enemy tank groups begin to open the battle. In Heereswaffenamt, the Army Ordnance Office, these complaints are brought together in a single line. On the desks lie summaries from the Eastern Front listing lost guns, and noting how long it took to change position after firing. In a separate line go the figures for propellant consumption. Since heavy artillery such as PAW 40 and PAK 43 takes too much powder, and by 1944 the depots can no longer replenish stocks fast enough. Inside the office they formulate the task in simple terms. They need a gun that can stop T-34 and Sherman at 700 metres, 765 yards, but is light enough to be pushed by an ordinary infantry gun crew. Rheinmetall-Borsig takes on the task, since this firm already has experience with 8 cm, 3.15-inch mortars, and with experiments to reduce barrel pressure. On the drawing boards appears a scheme in which a small high-pressure chamber with the propellant charge is placed inside the cartridge case, and around it there is a low-pressure volume connected to the barrel through dozens of small holes. The idea is that the powder first works inside the strong inner chamber, and through the holes gas gradually flows into the barrel and accelerates the projectile without a sharp blow to the barrel and carriage. This allows them to plan a light smoothbore barrel and to use a body unified with an 8 cm mortar round for the 8 cm. Bilasusgarpeter H14462 shaped charge projectile, which according to calculations should penetrate up to 140 mm, 5.5 inches of armour. And before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel, and if you're enjoying this one, don't forget to subscribe and smash a like. The military accept the scheme for development because it solves several problems at once. High pressure is locked inside a small chamber, so no tons of high-grade steel and hours of heat treatment are needed for a long barrel. Low pressure in the main part of the barrel requires less propellant per shot, which matters when the railways can no longer deliver enough ammunition to the front. The main point is that the planned mass of the new 8 cm Panzerabwehrwerfer 600 anti-tank gun should fit into roughly 640 kilograms, 1,410 pounds, which is a level where 4 men can roll such a gun several dozen metres over firm ground. This creates a technical requirement that is directly tied to what is happening on the ground between the Battle of Kursk and the start of Operation Bagration. The Eastern Front does not need record ranges or giant calibers. It needs guns that can appear with the infantry at the forward edge and disappear just as quickly from under return fire. In the documents of Heereswaffenamt, the new weapon appears as Panzerabwehrwerfer 600, and in conversation officers already shorten it to PAW 600, meaning a light anti-tank gun that is supposed to cover that empty band at medium combat ranges. At this point, the story does not yet know whether the new gun will reach its crews in time, but the need for it is already fixed in orders and production plans. In the winter of 1943 to 1944 at one of the German training grounds, the new 8cm Panzerabwehrwerfer 600 is rolled out of a hangar straight onto packed snow. The shield has no final paint yet, fresh weld seams are visible, but the barrel is already smooth and shorter than the familiar 7.5cm Pak 40. Steel plates are set up in front. On one of them, the figure 140mm, 5.5 inches, is written in chalk so that it is not confused with thinner targets. Officers from Heereswaffenamt and engineers from Rheinmetall-Borsig stand off to the side so that they can see both the crew and the aim point at the same time. For the first shot, they load a shaped charge round 8cm WGR Patra H 14462, which looks like an 8cm, 3.15 inch, mortar bomb, but with a clearly formed shaped cavity in the nose. The mass of this projectile stays within 7 to 8 kilograms, 15 to 17 pounds, and a single crewman easily rams it into the chamber. After the command the breech is closed, the men step back to the prescribed distance, and only the gun and the plate remain on the line. A short dull report sounds. The barrel travels slightly back and returns forward, and at the target a dark round hole with a melted edge appears in the steel surface. Next, they check the main condition for which the whole high-low pressure scheme was conceived: engagement of armour at a distance of about 700 metres, 765 yards. The plates are moved further away, the targets are marked with flags, a new range setting is entered on the site, and a space is left in the logbook for recording hits. The firing series shows that dispersion in height and width fits within the outline of a medium tank silhouette, and the shaped charge warhead confidently penetrates the specified thickness. Measurements record a muzzle velocity of about 520 meters per second, 1,706 feet per second. And the engineers note that for shaped charge action this is sufficient while keeping lower loads on barrel and carriage. When the range firing ends, the reports next to the name 8cm Panzerabwehrwerfer 600 contain not only diagrams but also figures for service life and mass. The carriage with shield and barrel gives about 640 kilograms, 1,410 pounds, and this is confirmed in practice when 4 men push the gun over compacted snow without a tractor. In the workshops of Rheinmetall-Borsig machines are cleared for the new order, smooth barrels start to be turned and carriages with spread trails are assembled. By the end of 1944, the first batches with the index 8H63 leave the factory, and production summaries show a line about several dozen completed guns per month. By early 1945, in one of the infantry units covering roads inside Germany, the crews receive their PAW 600, together with crates of shaped charge and high explosive fragmentation rounds. During training, the commander shows how to take position at a bend in the road, spread the trails, set the sight for 700 meters, 765 yards, and fire in time before a tank reaches the crossroads. Old 7.5 centimeters PAW 40 guns still stand nearby, but they are already used where there is a firm approach and a tractor can be brought up, while the new light guns are prepared exactly for those sectors where movement of heavy equipment is difficult. Explanations for the personnel state directly that PAW 600 is meant to supplement Panzerfaust, closing the medium distance rather than replacing all other weapons. In the spring of 1945, one of these batteries takes position on a line by the Aller River, where German units try to slow the advance of British and American forces. A PAW 600 is set behind the wall of a farm. The barrel is laid into a narrow gap between buildings so that it covers the approach to the bridge. At night, the crew checks sights, levels and crates with 8 centimeters. Großpater H 14462 rounds, keeping shaped charge ammunition on top and high explosive shells lower under a tarpaulin. By morning, the sound of engines is heard, and in the gaps between the trees the silhouettes of Cromwell and Sherman tanks appear, moving in column toward the crossing. When the lead vehicle comes out onto the straight section toward the bridge, the commander gives the range value already worked out during training. The gunner keeps the centre of the sight mark on the frontal profile of the tank. The loader feeds another 8 cm (3.15 inch) shaped charge round and rams it into the chamber. The shot again sounds short. Dust and pieces of plaster fall from the wall that hides the crew, and a moment later a black penetration mark appears on the armour of the first vehicle. The tanks behind start to shift. Some try to move to the roadside, but the narrow road and limited view pull the column forward straight into the gun sector. The second shot goes at the vehicle that tries to bypass the knocked-out tank along the edge of the roadway, and the shaped jet hits the joint between the front hull and the side. The track comes off, the tank stops at an angle, and a jam of immobilised vehicles forms on the road. On command, the crew rolls the PAW 600 back deeper into the yard to change position and avoid quick counter-battery fire on the previous point. With this weight, and the short recoil of the barrel, they manage to move and prepare a new firing point, before answering fire begins to hit the opening where the gun stood earlier. After changing position, the gun is placed not by the wall, but behind a low slope, with the barrel pointing through a narrow gap between a shed and an embankment. The commander again sets the sight to the familiar 700 metres, 765 yards, and keeps several 8 cm Buggeapater H 14462 shaped charge rounds in reserve stacked closer to the shield. Further down the road, the enemy tries to turn tanks around and bypass the stretch of knocked-out vehicles, but the terrain and tight verges do not allow them to quickly form a new battle order. That day, according to post-war British reports, the crossing over the Aller is taken anyway. But in the officers' notes there remains a remark about unexpectedly accurate and quiet fire from an unknown light anti-tank gun. By evening, the battery that lists this single PAW 600 in its strength receives an order to withdraw to a secondary line. The crew folds the trails, swings the barrel into the travelling position, and together with a horse team rolls the gun away from the farm toward the country road. In the unit log, if it survives to the end of the war, there will be an entry about several destroyed Cromwell and Sherman tanks, and the fact that the smoothbore gun worked the whole day without failures. A few days later, the front line moves further into Germany, and for this particular crew there is no longer a stable defensive line or a chance to settle in with the new weapon. In May 1945, when German units lay down their arms, the 8 cm Panzerabwehrwerfer 600 enters the general flow of captured weapons. In depots and parks where surrendered guns and vehicles are brought together, among the familiar 7.5 cm Pak-40 and anti-aircraft mounts, there are also several dozen barrels with unusually short, smooth tubes and light carriages. Members of the trophy teams mark the designation 8H63 on tags and write it into inventories that later go to the technical departments of the United States and the United Kingdom. For them, this is one of the samples that they're asked not just to write off, but to take apart carefully and test at a proving ground. In 1946, one of these samples arrives at Aberdeen Proving Ground in the United States. The gun is set up on a concrete pad, its mass is checked again, and fits the same 640 kilograms, 1,410 pounds, and a series of shots at steel plates selected by thickness is prepared. The report records a muzzle velocity of about 520 meters per second, 1,706 feet per second, and penetration close to 140 millimeters, 5.5 inches, which confirms the German test data analysts note separately that the main feature of the system lies not in the caliber itself and not in the type of carriage, but in the separation of high and low pressures inside the round. After the firing, the captured gun is stripped not for repair, but for study of its principle. Engineers remove the inner high-pressure chamber, measure its volume, wall thickness, and the diameter of the holes through which gas flows into the main barrel volume. On the drawings, a combination appears that is new for local specialists, where a strong small vessel effectively serves as the heart of the system, and the long part of the barrel works in a much softer regime. Analytical notes conclude that this principle may be useful where there is a need to limit recoil, reduce barrel mass, and use lighter carriages or even man-portable launchers. In later years, the high-low pressure idea moves away from towed guns toward infantry grenade launchers. When designers in the United States work on cartridges for 40mm systems, such as the M79 grenade launcher, and later the M203 underbarrel launcher, their technical descriptions already include a case with an internal high-pressure chamber and holes venting gas into the space around the projectile. This makes it possible to keep pressure in the barrel at a low level and make the barrel thinner and lighter than on a classic gun while still giving the grenade the required muzzle velocity. These solutions do not copy the PAW 600 directly, but the shared pressure distribution principle clearly links post-war grenade systems with the late-war German gun. Over time, most of the actual 8cm Panzerabwehrwerfer 600 are melted down, along with thousands of other captured weapons. Several barrels and carriages end up in museums and training collections, where they are preserved as a technical curiosity. In Poland, near Fort Gerhard by Świnoujście, one PAW 600 is installed in an exhibition next to other artillery pieces used on the Baltic coast. The plaque under the gun lists the 8cm, 3.15-inch caliber, mass, approximate direct fire range against a tank target, and the production years in the very end of the war. Another example is kept in the collection of an American weapons museum, where it is shown not as a combat unit, but as an illustration of the high-low pressure principle applied in a field gun. Visitors see the short, smooth barrel, light compared to other anti-tank systems, and the compact carriage designed for the effort of a small crew. Nearby there may be fragments of training or inert rounds showing the inner chamber and the holes through which gas entered the main volume. On the explanatory plaque, in addition to technical figures, there is often the same point that only about 260 units of such guns were produced, and they reached the front when major operations were already being decided by other means.